Fenton and I'm an aeromodeller and an engineer. Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. Hello again modellers, and welcome back to the workshop. This is going to be a short video and we're going to cover cutting and drawing the registration letters which are applied on the underside of the wings and on the tail. I've also done a slightly sneaky graphic for the rudder, just in keeping with the model. Not very scaled, but it's for a bit of fun. We'll also be looking at the canopy. You've seen some of it in the previous video, but we'll be finishing off the glazing and cutting the actual canopy that gets used. And lastly, we'll be looking at the pilot figure. You remember in the Oster we used oil paints to paint the figure, and it took 4 to 5 weeks for the oil paints to dry, which was not satisfactory. I won't be doing that again. So this time I've used acrylics in the airbrush, and it went reasonably well, as you'll see. Okay, let's crack on. What we're going to look at the moment, or for now, is the canopy and the blown sections of the rear windows on either side that are blown outwards. Anyway, so what I've done, I had to wait until the silver was really hard, because if you're manhandling it and it's not absolutely hard, the tape can mark it. As I told you before, Classcoat takes at least 24 hours before you put any tape on it. If you don't, the tape leaves a mottled effect into the paint, and it's ruined. You know, it looks terrible. So you have to wait at least 24 hours. So what I did was I laid masking tape down, and then I drew a line exactly where I wanted to cut it, and it was about 3mm in from the edge, all the way around with a nice radiused corner. And I cut it with my Dremel with this very sharp, very sharp routing bit. I don't know whether you can see it against that. I'll see it against my hand maybe. It is extremely sharp, but it is fluted. And it's excellent for just drawing a line and cutting out stuff like that, and glass fibre. So as I say, I marked it out in tape, drew a pencil line, curved corners, cut it all out, and then I tidied it all up with a variety of tools, including round and flat permagrit bars, a large round, well not large, but medium sized fine bar, even some sandpaper. But what seemed to work best was the flat permagrit, but used a long. If you go in and out, it tends to bring up a burr, and it's quite difficult to remove. But if you go along, it seems to work better. But it is a faff. It's not very easy to tidy up the edges. So once I've done that and made sure that the blown section fitted inside okay, and I've left an overlap, and I probably should reduce that overlap right down. I'm wondering whether I should or not. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a Sharpie and I'm going to outline the window. From the outside to the inside. Just like this. And what I'll do is I'll cut it just to the outside of that line. Just remember, that can be seen from the outside, so you've got to be a bit careful. I probably should have gone a little bit outside of the edge of that, but anyway, that's what I've done. So then what you do is you lay masking tape on and you squeeze the two sections together as tightly as you can. And you can see there's a good joint there. What we do then is we run Formula 560 canopy glue, maybe with a syringe top or something, right around the seam on the inside, and that should seal it. To make doubly sure, I'll probably run one around the outside as well. Oops. So there we go. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, I took the panel out, cut along the lines, and repositioned it back in and reapplied the tape. So hopefully we can do the edges now. What might have to happen is I might have to leave this for a day to dry before I then do the other side. It'd be safer. because what I found with the yellow one, the practice one, this one, was that when I cut the frame out of both sides, the whole thing became very, very flimsy and very difficult to work with, especially when you were sanding. So I think on this case I'll be a little bit more cautious, and I'll glue this one in, let it set for 24 hours, and then I'll cut out the other one. That way I'll maintain some rigidity. Somebody was asking about these tails before, and you can get them on eBay quite cheaply, and they just fit quite nicely on top of bottles. Give you a more delicate point. Now in this case I don't want it anywhere near as long as that, so I'm going to sacrifice a good chunk of that. You wouldn't normally. What I was actually looking for was these, and I've got hundreds of these somewhere, a whole box of them. A bit blowed if I can find them. Anyway, this will do the trick. All we do, make sure it's sealed. And then try and get it into the joint between the two. You can see capillary action is actually sucking it in between the two. Quite often the canopy is grasped, well, you have to grasp the canopy to lift the whole cockpit section off to get to the batteries. What I'm going to do actually is I'm going to put some tape over this just to hold that section down, because I can see it's lifting. It's not lifting on the outside, it is on the inside. So I'm just going to run some tape along there just to force it into a little bit better contact. You can see it's soaked right in anyway, so it's going to do the job. Now what can happen is, the way the canopy glue dries is it dries by evaporation to the most part, and because I've sealed all the edges that might take a little longer to dry, so we'll just have to see. But it should be okay probably by the end of the day, or certainly tomorrow morning, to be able to peel all that off. Okay, got plenty more to do, so we're going to find something else to touch. Alright. I've shown this before, the creation of stencils using Adobe Illustrator on my PC, and then using a cutter plotter that I've got, that again I've shown you, a Robocraft cutter plotter. And what I've done in this instance, instead of making a mask using the MetaMask film, I'm using matte black vinyl, which was just got from the internet, you know, off of eBay, and I've run it through the cutter, and it's it's cut the stencils. So I'm just going to quickly peel them off so you can see what happens basically. So I'm using my weeding tweezers, which I've shown you before. They're like normal tweezers, but they're just really sharp, so you can get right into the edge. Now if we were doing a mask, we would take the letters away and just leave an outline, but because we're actually using, we're going to put the vinyl on the model, you need to actually lift the edge. Now that should come up, yes it has. The W you've got to watch, because it doesn't always want to go in the right direction. And then just take out the centres of the 9 and the P. I'll do larger ones for the underside of the wings when we get there, but it's the same process, it's just bigger. But there we have the letters, just going to hold it down with a ruler just to keep it still, because I was going to say we need transfer tape, but we could get away without, but I'm going to use transfer tape to get those letters and the spacing exactly in the right place. And this is transfer tape. It's a clear plastic tape, and we only need a small piece of this. Just like that. Put it down nice and hard. Okay, and then we'll get rid of the bits we don't want, just to keep it pretty. It's also useful if you make that line straight to the bottom, because you then can use this to line it up on the model. Okay, just like that. Remove those bits, and we're left with, if we peel it off, vinyl can stick sometimes better to the backing than it does to the transfer tape. So you gotta, I'm just burnishing it down with my fingernail to make sure it lifts completely. That one hasn't. That one, haha, one hasn't. So there we have the vinyl transfer, or the decal, ready to apply to the model. So the registration letters go directly under the anti-spin streak and pretty much central. Let's see, where does the 1 go? The 9 is the demarcation point. So we've got our blue band in slightly the wrong place, I think. So we're just going to have to wing it. I think. Just accept that not exactly accurate. But we knew this all the way along because it's an idea. Peel the transfer tape off. And there we go. Please don't look too closely at that tail wheel. It's dreadful, isn't it? WP971 is born. Okay guys, now if you get this wrong, I'm afraid I'm going to have to drum you out of the club. Because this is one of the things you must not get wrong, because you will be laughed out of your flying club. Well, you will be if there's any scale modelers there, that's for sure. You have to make sure that you put the registrations alternate ways up. When you come to put the lettering on the underside of the wings, this is the standard that the RAF used, definitely for the Chipmunk and probably for a lot of other aircraft of the period, training aircraft of the period. So, on the starboard wing, the lettering is that way up. So it's the right way up when read from the tail, and on the port wing, it's the right way up when read from the nose. Okay, so now what we need to do is draw a straight line right the way across from wingtip to wingtip so that we can align these. Now whether these are aligned perfectly will depend on your subject aircraft. The one I have a photograph of that I'm looking at the moment is not perfectly aligned. So it isn't always the case. Sometimes they can have a sweep back type effect. But usually, in my experience, they're in a straight line. And they also seem to be in a straight line from the centre of the roundel. Not always, but just in several that I've looked at. Again, check your subject aircraft. Don't take anything for granted. You notice I've used the wing joiner tube just to make sure everything is in alignment. And I've just gone roughly to the centre of the roundels. Now these are probably a little bit too small, because they should actually go from the wing root to the roundels, so they should be probably slightly bigger. But I'm going for this size so that I can fit around the servo hatches. So I'm actually going to put the W just in board of the servo hatch. And does that look right? Difficult to know, isn't it? Right, well, I'm going for that. And that just about completes the bottom of the chipmunk. I'm just working on the spinner, and then we have the exhaust, and the model will be finished. So, turning my attention to the pilot figure, I thought I'd take one of the 3D printed ones I'd got that was printed by a friend, and I drew a line through him and then cut him out. You can see the internal structure of these 3D printed figures, and they're very light. So the idea is I'm just going to sit him like that on the base that's inside the cockpit. So what we need to do now is just tidy up some of the flashings, make it pretty, and then we get the paints out. This time I'm not going to use oil paints, which I did previously, and it took a month to dry, believe it or not. So this time I'm just going to use Tamiya acrylics and slap it all on there. Okay. So while we're waiting for the glue to dry on the canopy, I thought I'd have a look at the pilot figure, see how we can get on with him. So first of all, I'm going to do something called pre-shading, kind of like pre-shading. So what I'm going to use is some XF1 flat black. Grey might have been better, but we'll go with flat black. Now I'm going to make sure that the brush is quite wet. So in other words, thinning the paint very slightly. And then I'm just going to go over the edges. Just to get some colour in the recesses. It's almost, the messier they make this bit, the better, but you'll see. And you want it to run. Although the way it's running in this instance, it's not ideal because it's running into the grain of the 3D printed pilot. But I think we'll be all right. Also, what I want to do is just put some pre-shading in the areas where the fabric is kind of folded. And then we have that bit done. The beauty of the Tamiya paints is it's water soluble. So for the most part you can clean your brushes in water. And it dries very quickly. I think I'm going to try and airbrush it. So the colour of his overalls, I'm going to go for a sort of we're either looking at a khaki drab or an olive green or a dark green. I think maybe khaki drab. How's about that then? Might try an olive green for the straps. I'm going to try and spray it because I like the softer edge that the spray gives you. I'm just going to see if the Harder and Steenbeck will actually give me a fine enough line along the edges. I shouldn't really have stirred it with that, but never mind. And I should have put gloves on. Never mind. So we'll try a drop of this in the gun, in the brush, and I'll leave it as it is. Now this is for the seat belts, so I want it to go on very, very narrow. Right, where were we? So the way I'm doing this is I'm just pulling the trigger back slightly and then pressing it down. You should bring the air in first and then bring it back. Not very easy, but you press the air and then you introduce the paint by pulling back. So there's the basic look. You'll notice there that I pulled the needle from the front, out the front. And the reason I did that was any paint that is in the airbrush body would be drawn out the front. If you pull it out the back, which you have to do on some airbrushes, then you drag the paint, the residual paint, from the needle into the body of the brush, and it's very difficult to clean that out. So try and always insert the needle from the rear and remove it through the front. Now I'm just going to have a quick dig around in there because that is a bit grubby. See how we get on. And I think I'm quite pleased with that. So as you can see, I finished the pilot figure. What I used was a 3D printed head that my friend Eric had done for me. And it's actually flesh coloured resin that he uses, which is quite impressive. So it saves you painting the head in a sort of a flesh colour. So it's not brilliant, but I do think it's much better having done it with the airbrush. Certainly the hair, with the edges being a lot softer like that, I think looks much better. The last one I did with a brush, it's just too harsh. And I like the way the pre-shadings worked on the green or the khaki. And all in all, it's pretty good. I've not done anything to remove the lines from printing the torso. The head was a resin cast, so you don't get lines with resin casting. But the torso, I've not done anything to it. I've just painted straight over the top. And I think for the chippy, I think he'll be fine. It does look like he's concentrating rather hard though, so or constipated, one or the other. Anyway, there we go. We'll try him in the cockpit and see how he looks.